Hi there, and welcome to Module 3 of this course. In this module, we'll be talking about creating your book blueprint. And we're going to be running through three different lessons. The first lesson is the simple three-part book structure. Here, we're going to be talking about how to break your book into three parts, very simple, very straight to the point, that you can practicalize in order to ensure that your book has a journey that people can follow through with. Now, the first thing is structure matters. And why does structure matter? Structure matters because it gives you a roadmap to work with. It gives you a clear writing roadmap. Secondly, it keeps readers engaged from start to finish. And lastly, it prevents overwhelm and messy drafts. It prevents you from getting overwhelmed, and it prevents you from having drafts that you just cannot piece together. Because what happened? The last part is suddenly in the middle, and you have liters of different parts merged into each other, and the story just can't make sense, even though it makes sense in your head, right? That's why structure matters. Now we have the three-part structure, and let's look at that at a glance, right? It's just three parts. There's the beginning, the middle, and the end. Simple. Now, the beginning part is the setup part, where you introduce the problem, you introduce the story, and you introduce the promise. Now, the problem is what you're trying to solve for. Your story is what your experience has been, and the promise is what you are promising people that they would get to experience while reading your book and after reading the book. Now, the second is the middle, which is the solution part. Here, you're breaking down key lessons, you're breaking down steps, and you're breaking down methods, depending on which ones you have. So, yes, you've introduced the problem, and you're saying, okay, this is what you need to learn, this is how you got to this point, this is what you need to get out of this point, this is one, method two, method three, right? That you need to take. For instance, what I'm sharing with you right now, the three-part structure, is a method of getting to the point where you have a written book. Now, the end part is a recap. Is the next step part. Is you have the recap, you encourage people to take certain action and lead to and you talk about what is next. What do they have to do next? Where do they need to go next? What should they be doing? Do you understand? After reading your book, what should they expect? Should they start looking at themselves in the mirror and saying affirmation words? Should they start looking for a new job? What exactly should they do now that they've finished reading your book? Do you want them to read another one of your books? That's the question. So what next? Let's walk through a sample breakdown. The first part is, why does this matter? Let's say that's what the first part of your book is about. Why does this matter? Under the first part, you're going to have samples, chapters under that first part, and everything in that chapter would talk about why what you're doing matters. Now let's go to part 2, how to do what you're talking about. Now, in this section, there will also be chapters, and all the chapters in this section are going to talk about, how to do this, how to that might not be the exact title, but that's what the content will be hinged on. That's what the content will be hinged on. So I'm going to look for a random book around me. I have The Rules of Wealth. The way it is structured, you have the introductory part where it talks about why do you even need to get wealthy in the first place, and then the last part talk about okay, so now you're wealthy, now what do you do with other people's wealth, what do you do with your own wealth, right? That's what the third part talks about. To be fair, if you have a copy of The Rules of Wealth, you would know that it is not the perfect example for this case. So I'm going to use another example. So firstly, why does this matter? Let's say we're talking about self-awareness. Why do you need to be self-aware? Okay, so you start to talk about your journey and what you had to do, what you had to see, what you had to correct, what your story was like, and how you have come to a point where you can now share it with them. Now, second part is how to do it. How do I become a self-aware person? So you're talking to one reader. How do you become a self-aware person, right? Or you need to go back to the past. You need to get rid of all the hurt and the pain from your past. Or you need to become a confident person. This is how you become a confident person. Or you need to affirm yourself. Or you need to become your biggest cheerleader. Or you need to be ready to take responsibility for your wrongdoing. You see, we're writing a self-aware book already. And then what next? So now that you know how to become self-aware, then you tell them, okay, so you can share your own story too, and we're going to talk about that a bit in a bit. This is where I am at the moment, and You need to wake up every morning and look in the mirror. Remember, this is a case study, so don't laugh at our story. You look in the mirror and tell yourself, I am great, I'm going to be successful, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that. That's what to do next. Or then you also have to read these other books, right? Just give them next steps, actionables. Here are tips for writing each part, right? Firstly, share your personal story. Make sure you share your personal story. There's nothing that people connect to more than understanding that this person has gone through this thing. It's not fugazi. They have their own personal story in this area. That's what makes you an expert to their emotions. Secondly, teach them with clarity and practical steps. Be very clear in your communication and the steps that you're sharing that they should take. Don't tell anybody to walk to Mars, because that's not going to happen, right? Don't tell them to do things that might be beyond their means. Make room so that anybody and everybody can practicalize whatever it is that you're saying. Don't ask them to go and figure out how to meet the wealthiest man in the world and shake his hand. That's only achievable for a limited number of people, right? So let the steps be very practical, let it be very organized, let it be clear. Lastly, encourage the reader to take action. That's what happens towards the end. What next? Tell them to take action. Tell them to do something. That's what keeps you as an author in their art. That's what keeps your book in their art. And that's what keeps you constantly connected to them. And also, after telling them to take action, also make sure that you offer more ways for them to stay connected to you. Whether it's through other books or whether it's through connecting with you on social media, just find ways for them to stay connected with you. Now we're moving to the next lesson, and in this next lesson we're talking about outlining in 30 minutes. How to outline your book in 30 minutes, doing an activity called the sticky note method. Now, why should you use the sticky note method? It is very quick, it's very visual, so you can see what you're trying to do in front of you. If you note that the other method, which is the 3-part structure method, you're going to be doing a lot more writing, except you want to transition it into a visual activity, but it's much more of a written activity. But for the sticky notes method, it's quick, it's visual, it's flexible. In my perspective, it's a step up of the 3-part method, and it brings things into perspective in your mind, puts a picture in your mind. Secondly, it helps you to get ideas out of your head really fast. Lastly, it is great for organizing non-linear thoughts. So if you're someone who has ADHD, or you know that you're not very focused, or you've not really gotten a grasp of what the flow of your thoughts should be like for the book, the sticky note method is very, very perfect for you. Now, how does it work? 4 steps. Firstly, you grab sticky notes, or you do a digital board. You open a digital board. Miro has that, Jamboard has that. I would suggest Miro because it's something I've worked with before. You get a digital sticky note board, or you get sticky notes yourself in front of a table. For each sticky note, you write one idea or one tip or one story per note. Even if it's a personal story you're trying to do. Also, let's say we're writing a story about our grandma, and in the first part you're saying, oh, grandma went to Ghana, or grandma got married to her first husband. In another note we're writing, oh, grandma gave birth to her first child and almost died. In the next note we're writing grandma's sickness when she was old. Basically, every tip, every idea, every story in a note. Now you're going to take those notes and you're going to cluster them into 3 parts: the beginning, the middle, and the end, just like the 3-part structure we talked about. But you're going to do the beginning, you're going to do the middle, you're going to do the end, right? So once you've clustered them into 3 parts, you've broken them all apart. So grandma being given birth to is definitely in the beginning. Grandma getting married is definitely in the middle. Grandma falling sick towards the end is definitely at the end. But then you arrange all of the thoughts, all the many thoughts that you have under each cluster into a logical flow. So definitely, in grandma's middle, right, in the middle cluster for grandma's book, where we might be having, let's say grandma got married before she gave birth to a child. So the sticker note for grandma getting married to her first husband will be first, before grandma giving birth to her first child will be next. Now I'm using like a memoir example. So I arrange them into a logical flow. Same thing with the self-awareness thing. Certain things have to be done before certain things can be done. Okay, so you have to arrange them in a logical flow, and then you have a picture of what your book needs to look like. You can refer to that digital board at any time, at any place, and it gives you a guide, a pictorial guide on what the flow is like when you're writing your book. Things that you need to include in this your sticky notes are problems that your readers are facing, your own personal stories, your turning points, lessons, tools or strategies, call to actions or next steps. Now, in grammar's case, we might not be able to, introduce that. So let's look for another case study, right? Let's talk about self-awareness again. So what problems do people that are not self-aware usually face? Write a sticky notes for that. Or people who are not self-aware often make wrong judgments. Then you have a story about how you made wrong judgments. Let's say you want to put a story about how you made wrong judgments. You have to write the story about how you made wrong judgment, and you talking about your readers facing wrong judgment should be very close to one another. They shouldn't be in different parts of the book. They most likely are tied together, so you organize them together. So sticky notes, okay, your personal stories, you can have sticky notes for that. Turning points, changes you made, have a sticky note for that. Lessons that you learned from these stories, lessons that you learned from certain experiences, tools, strategies, call to actions, and next steps. Here are some bonus tips. You can outline one chapter at a time using this method, right? So once you've clustered everything, it's easy for you to I'm taking these 3 notes and I'm putting them in one chapter. I'm taking these 5 notes and this will be one chapter, this will be another chapter, this will be another chapter, right? Another tip for the sticky notes method is you can use sticky notes on a wall or on a wide table, or also use so that you can separate them easily. Or if you're working with a smaller space, use color codes. So you have the pink sticky notes and the yellow sticky notes and the green sticky notes, and then you can use them to sort of guide which is which. So let's say you're writing stories, it depends on how your brain wants to process it. You can do sticky notes for only beginning and middle and end, but that would mean that you're using a lot of sticky notes because you have to write a couple of times. Or you can write green sticky notes for stories, pink sticky notes for problems, yellow sticky notes for tools, right? And once you do this right, once you're able to do this right, feel free to do a lot more research or a bit more research on the sticky notes writing guide. You're able to do this right, that outline becomes your writing guide, and it makes it easy for you to move from one place to the other one. It makes it easy for you to connect one idea to the next one. Now we're moving on to the next lesson, which is titles, chapters, and flow, how to keep it reader friendly. Firstly, your book title is your promise. So whenever people read your book, your book title, they should get a promise. They should understand that this is what this author is promising to share with me as I read their book. You have to keep it clear, you have to keep it benefit driven, and you need to keep it keyword rich. Let me explain keyword rich. So Richard Templar wrote a book, the one I spoke about some minutes ago, and it's titled The Rules of Wealth. Imagine that he decided to title the book The Rules of Becoming. Meanwhile, the book is filled with tips and tools and methods and stories on how to be wealthy, how to keep wealth, how to deal with people's wealth. So the key word there is wealth. Why is wealth missing? Right? But when I see the title, The Rules of Wealth, I know we're about to talk about wealth. That's the key word. I know that there are rules there. I understand the benefits. It is clear, it is straight to the point. You can use a main title. You definitely have to have a main title, right? And you can also now have a subtitle, like the title of this course. Start before you're ready. How to launch without perfect plans. Now, a subtitle is optional, but if you need a subtitle to explain exactly what you're trying to do, please feel free to put a subtitle. My most recent book, Remy, the book is Remy. It's named after the main character of the book, but there's also a subtitle, A Mess is Masterpiece. And it brings a picture to people's mind where they're like, oh, you know what? She had, because it's fiction, she had a messy life and someone made a masterpiece of it, right? So it could just have been titled Remy, but adding the subtitle sort of gave a bit more context into what the book was promising to talk about. Also think, would your ideal reader see your title and click on it on Amazon? Let's say a book is just titled B, BE, nothing else, no subtitle, nothing, just BE. What do you think? Do you think your ideal reader is someone who is curious enough to click on it on an Amazon storefront or pick it up in a library if they just see B? You know, does your ideal reader have the time to get curious? Does your ideal reader like mystery? Do you understand? So things like that should guide you when you're trying to pick out a book title. Also, make your book title easy to read. Make it easy to read. Let your book formatting be very easy to understand. Use your let your book titles be straightforward. Let them be straight to the point, and also make sure that the paragraphs that make up your book are not unnecessarily long. Now, this is a battle I personally had because I tend to talk in length without commas and full stops. So this is something I had to practice, and right now I do it a lot more at the editing phase of my book. But use short paragraphs and use headers. It doesn't have to just be a long script. You can use headers to break it down into different places. You can choose to include bullet points to communicate, as long as it helps you communicate better. Yes, please. You can choose to include bullet points, you can choose to include quotes, you can choose to include recaps, and then you can end each chapter with a next step or a reflection, whether just as another paragraph or at the end of the book. Let's say it's a very practical book. You create a subheading that says next steps. Also, putting your reader first in what you're writing is what will give you impact and then cause sales for you. But if you're just focused on making sales and you're not considering what your reader needs to hear, right, and you're just considering on just passing the knowledge across and moving on, then you're not going to make a lot of impact, neither are you going to make a lot of sales. Your book is not about showing off what you know. It's about guiding the reader towards transformation. You have to keep your message very focused on your reader, focused enough for your reader to follow through with, focused enough for your reader to pay full attention to, and you need to keep your tone helpful, not authoritative, not rude, not proud, but focused and helpful. Thank you very much. That's all for Module 3. In the next module, which is Module 4, we'll be talking about how to write without writing. I'm certain that that's what a lot of people are interested in, how to write without having to stress yourself because you have a busy schedule, maybe because you're an entrepreneur or a professional. So I'll see you in the next module.